Imagine if something as simple as what you eat every day could actually lower your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's is often thought of as something driven by age or genetics, but research is starting to show that your daily habits, especially your diet, may play a much bigger role than we once thought. So, in this video, I'm going to break down how the Mediterranean diet may help reduce Alzheimer's risks, what the science actually shows, and what that means in a practical, real-world sense. Here's what we're going to cover. First, I'll explain why Alzheimer's disease is such an important issue and why prevention matters. Then, I'll walk through how diet affects brain health and introduce the Mediterranean diet. From there, I'll break down three key research studies, including what they did and what they found. Finally, I'll connect everything together and end with practical takeaways you can actually apply to your life. So, Alzheimer's disease is a progressive neurological disorder that affects memory, thinking, and behavior. Over time, it can severely impact a person's ability to function independently. What makes it especially concerning is that there is currently no cure and treatment options are limited. Because of this, prevention has become a major focus in research. Instead of only asking how we treat Alzheimer's, scientists are now asking how we can reduce the risk of it developing in the first place, especially through factors we can control, like lifestyle and diet. So, how does diet actually affect the brain? Diets that are high in refined sugars, saturated fats, and heavily processed foods promote chronic inflammation in the body. Over time, this inflammation doesn't just affect physical health, it can also damage brain cells and contribute to cognitive decline. This is important because inflammation is considered a key factor in the development and progression of Alzheimer's disease. On the other hand, diets that are rich in whole foods and healthy fats can help reduce inflammation and support brain function, which may slow down or even prevent some of these negative processes. This is where the Mediterranean diet becomes especially relevant. The Mediterranean diet is not just a list of foods, it's a long-term eating pattern that emphasizes fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, fish, and olive oil, while limiting processed foods and red meat. What makes this diet particularly powerful is its combination of nutrients. It provides antioxidants, healthy fats, and anti-inflammatory compounds that support both cardiovascular and brain health. And because brain health is closely connected to overall vascular health and inflammation levels, this type of diet has become a major focus in research on Alzheimer's prevention. Before jumping into the individual studies, it's important to understand the types of evidence we're working with. The research includes large human studies that track people over time, as well as experimental studies that test how specific foods affect the brain. Each type of study answers a different question. Human studies show patterns and long-term outcomes in real life, while experimental studies help explain the biological mechanisms behind those patterns. By looking at all of these together, we get a much more complete understanding of how diet may influence Alzheimer's risk. So, to dive in, let's start with one of the most important studies on this topic, conducted by Nicholas Skermes. This study followed participants over time and grouped them based on how closely they followed the Mediterranean diet. Now look at this graph. On the x-axis, we have time measured in years, and on the y-axis, we have cumulative survival, which in this case represents the likelihood of not developing Alzheimer's over time. Each line represents the different levels of adherence to the Mediterranean diet. The lowest line represents people with low adherence, and the middle line represents with moderate adherence, and the highest line represents those who followed the diet most consistently. What's really important is how these lines separate as time goes on. The group with the highest adherence remains consistently higher, meaning they are less likely to develop Alzheimer's. In contrast, the low adherence group declines more quickly, indicating a higher risk over time. This shows a clear pattern. The more closely individuals follow the Mediterranean diet, the lower the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. Because this is a long-term human study, it provides strong evidence that dietary habits can influence cognitive health over time, even though it shows association rather than direct causation. Now, on to study 2. What if it doesn't follow the diet perfectly? Does it still make a difference? That's exactly what this next study looks at, conducted by Martha Claire Morris. This study introduced the MIND diet, which is specifically designed to support brain health. Looking at this graph, We again see the time on the x-axis and the cognitive health over time on the y-axis. Each line represents a different level of adherence to the MIND diet. The dashed line shows low adherence, the solid line shows moderate adherence, and the dotted line shows high adherence. What's especially important here is that even the moderate adherence group performs significantly better than the low adherence group. And as expected, the high adherence group shows the strongest outcomes over time. This tells us something really important. You don't have to follow the diet perfectly to see benefits. Even moderate improvements in diet can slow cognitive decline and reduce Alzheimer's risk. This makes the findings much more practical and achievable for real-life application. So, now that we've seen patterns in human populations, the next question is, what's actually happening in the brain? To explore this, a study by Stephen A. Farr looked at the effects of extra virgin olive oil using a mouse model of Alzheimer's disease. In this study, mice were given diets supplemented with olive oil, and their learning and memory were tested. The results showed that mice receiving olive oil performed better on these cognitive tests compared to those who did not. This suggests that specific components of the Mediterranean diet, like olive oil, may have direct neuroprotective effects. Unlike observational human studies, this type of experimental study helps show a clear cause and effect relationship, giving insight into the biological mechanisms behind the diet's benefits. So, when we put all of this together, a clear pattern emerges. Human studies show that people who follow the Mediterranean diet have a lower risk of Alzheimer's disease, and experimental studies suggest that specific components of the diet may directly support brain function. This means diet is not just a general health factor, it's something that we may actively influence how the brain ages. Most importantly, diet is a modifiable risk factor. Unlike genetics, it's something that we can actually change, which makes these things especially impactful. So, what does this all actually mean? It means that diet should be viewed as a long-term investment in brain health, not just physical health. The Mediterranean diet is consistently linked to a reduced risk of Alzheimer's disease, and importantly, these benefits are seen even with moderate adherence. This suggests that prevention is not about being perfect, it's about making consistent, sustainable choices over time. A key factor connecting all of this is inflammation, which links diet to cognitive decline. By reducing inflammation, it may be possible to slow or prevent some of the processes that contribute to Alzheimer's disease. Ultimately, Alzheimer's risk is not entirely predetermined. It can be influenced by everyday lifestyle choices. So, from a practical standpoint, this doesn't require a complete lifestyle overhaul. Simple changes like eating more fruits and vegetables, choosing fish over red meat, and using olive oil instead of saturated fats can make a meaningful difference. At the same time, reducing processed foods, added sugars, and fried foods can help lower inflammation in the body. These small, consistent changes may not seem significant in the moment, but over time, they can have a powerful impact on both physical and cognitive health. And that's why this is so important, because protecting your brain doesn't start later. It starts with the choices you make every day. Thank you for listening to me, and I hope you have a nice day.